I healed and I forgave them, and I never got an apology. I never even got acknowledgement that it happened. So there was a lot of gaslighting. I wanted other people to know it was possible to heal, even if you don't have that Kodak moment or that sit down in therapy with your parents where they say they're sorry for all the crappy things they did.
Hello, welcome to Women Awakening. I'm your host, Cynthia James. And, you know, every day I just am grateful that I get to be in a space where I get to introduce women to women from around the world who are open and available to share their wisdom, their courage, their journeys, so that we can build a more compassionate world. I mean, this is a time for me where women are emerging, and I want to invite listeners to step into their gifts, to their voices, to their leadership, and their power. Today, we're going to talk about transforming your life no matter what circumstance. So, if the show resonates with you, subscribe, share, and leave a comment. It helps the people that I bring on as guests to be more visible in the world. And you can also connect with me at cynthiajames.net. So, I'm going to give you an introduction, but then I'm going to tell you how I know this person. Her name is Stephanie Weaver, and she's an experienced curator and storytelling strategist with a rich career spanning museum storytelling, public health, speaker coaching, and she's worked in the range of iconic institutions from the San Diego Zoo to the White House. She's a world traveler who embarked on a solo journey through Southeast Asia at 28. Stephanie has curated TEDx San Diego, coached hundreds of speakers, and authored 5 books that illuminate the power of personal narrative. She's a survivor and an advocate. She's transformed personal battles with childhood, sexual abuse, and chronic illness into a mission of helping others. Her new book, Bittersweet: How Do You Heal Yourself When Your Family is Broken, is out this year. Hello, Stephanie, and thank you
Hello.
so much for being here.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction, Cynthia.
Listen, everybody, I know Stephanie because I got to do a TEDx talk, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I picked her name from a list, and she was the perfect person for me. So, Stephanie, I wanna start with how you grew where were you born? Where you grew up?
So I grew up in a suburb of Cleveland and then Connecticut, and my family is spread out in terms of children, ages, geography, and so mainly I grew up with my younger brother, who's 5 years younger, and my parents, and we were kind of a white picket fence family with some dark secrets behind the fence.
I can relate to that, except I didn't even have the white picket fence, so but so I know I wanna get deep into your book, but I wanna talk about your subtitle. It struck me, "How to Heal Yourself When Your Family is Broken." So, why did you wanna go into this topic?
So as you alluded to, I'm a childhood sexual abuse survivor, which I didn't know until I was 30. I had no memories. I had very few memories of my childhood, and the only reason I kind of know much about it is because my dad was a photography buff, so he took hundreds of pictures of us. But beyond that, I really dissociated pretty much most of my childhood and young adulthood. So, when my mom was dying, I came home with her recipe box, and I started looking through it, and I kind of was like, "Oh my god, her whole life is in here because there were recipes from when she was in her 20s. I mean, I knew from, where they were from through all of the iterations of her children to me and recipes that I loved and made, and I just felt like there was so much material in there. That was as a writer, that was kind of my reaction to it. So, I was waiting for the call that she had actually finally died and started going through it every night and started writing about the recipes initially. Had no idea I was writing a memoir. I was like 25,000 words into something, and I was like, "Man, I need help," because I'm a nonfiction writer that's kind of how to self-help genre, personal growth, but I had never written memoir. I mean, my stories have been part of my previous books, but only to support the information for the readers. So this was a totally different, real, true journey, and had to find a class, spent 2 years with a class working on it, and then another 4 years revising and coming in and out of it. And my initial feeling about why I wanted to write the book was not to drag my parents through the mud, who are both dead now. It's not because I'm angry. It was because I healed and I forgave them, and I never got an apology. I never even got acknowledgement that it happened. So there was a lot of gaslighting, and yeah, I wanted other people to know it's possible to heal, even if you don't have that Kodak moment or that sit down in therapy with your parents where they say they're sorry for all the crappy things they did. So that was the motivation to keep going and to find a publisher, is because I needed this book when I was 25, when I was super depressed and didn't know why. I needed it when I was 35 and I was estranged, 45, sick and not feeling well and still estranged. I needed it so many times in my life. And so I just truly believe that there's got to be so many women out there who are estranged from family, have abuse in their childhoods, have maybe memory loss of things that happened, and need validation that it's not you, it's them, but you can still heal.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that because I was in my 40s before I recognized what had happened to me. It took a while for me to get to being able to face my life and everything that had happened. But I guess I really love that in spite of everything that had gone on and the feelings and the ups and the downs emotionally, you were called to help other people. And and did you know why?
Well, I've always been kind of a teacher. I worked in the museum field and I was in education, and so I was always that kind of writer, helping people understand whatever the exhibition was about, or teaching kids about nutrition, or whatever the different topics were. So that my first book was for museum professionals to help them do the same things with their experience. And then when I was diagnosed with migraine at 53, I couldn't believe how few resources there were for people. And I was a food blogger, and I had, a public health degree and an education background and curriculum. And I was like, well, I guess it's up to me to write this book that I need. And so that was book 3. And then book 4 was the cookbook. So it's, they seem like they're not written by the same person, but there's definitely a track if you know me and you understand kind of where I'm coming from. So the goal was always, if this book, you know, at some point, memoirists have to say, am I writing this for myself, or am I really writing this for an audience? And it's perfectly valid to write your story and heal doing that. But it has to have a sort of a bigger meaning to, and broader for more people. Unless you're like a celebrity, right? Then you can publish your memoir. But if you're not famous, then there has to be some bigger thing. And so for me, I finally realized that estrangement was in the news constantly. I was seeing it, in headlines. I was seeing it in advice columns. I was hearing it on podcasts. And I thought, oh, well, I was estranged from my parents for 16 years. So maybe I should kind of lean into that aspect of my story. And I completely rewrote the whole book, like rearranged it and everything, and added supplemental material. So now I kind of go in and out of the memoir piece and talk about, I didn't realize at the time X and Y and Z were happening. And I'm putting my experiences into context for other people who are probably going through that same thing and didn't realize what was going on. So that's how it came to be. And my hope is, it'll find the people that need it.
Yeah, well, it's beautiful. And, I think from a perspective of the feminine, it is so important in this moment for women to be bringing their wisdom, their stories, and their experiences right to the surface because we need to hear them. And we need to know that we're not alone as we're traversing whatever is going on in our lives.
For those of you who are listening audio, I'm just nodding my head vigorously right now to everything she just said. Yes, we need more matriarchy and less patriarchy, more women's stories. And, people have said, like, oh, it's really brave that you're doing this. And I mean, I guess it's brave, but it's also just feels necessary. Like, I didn't need the world to know this happened to me. I wanted people to know that it was possible to heal from this. That's the difference.
100%, 100%. That my writing has been about the same. So I want to talk a little bit about you as a TEDx coach. And I want to start with my experience because it's about ideas we're spreading. But there's stories that go with the idea we're spreading. And so I guess I wanted to just because for me, you asked me to be real and also to have context. So when you're working with people, are you working with them from the point of view of the story is important as well as the information that they wanna share?
It depends on where the person is starting from. I only work with people who are booked to speak somewhere. It doesn't have to be a TEDx, but that is my primary style because there's a lot of conferences that also do TED style talks. So if someone comes to me and says, I'm booked for a talk and this is my topic, but I kind of have never done this style before and it's 12 minutes, then I'm like, great, that's my jam. Like, that's exactly what I do. Sometimes I'll be tasked by an organization or a TEDx to coach everyone, and the people have maybe been chosen but didn't even apply. So they don't even really know what they're gonna talk about. So that's a little bit harder because then it's more about, finding out the person's story. My first session is of the 10 sessions is an hour and basically just feels like an interview, like an intake interview, and write by hand because there's a intuitive piece to what I do, and, what I'm listening for is, when somebody says something that their face lights up, 'cause I always work on Zoom. That's what I wanna get on stage, but also that's where their passion is. So then I ask them to tell me about that, and often it's a hobby. It has nothing to do with the content of the talk, but we can use it as a metaphor to kind of frame for you, it was the kitchen table, right? And all the things that happen around the kitchen table, and that's so relatable as well. So part of the reason that storytelling is so powerful is because we are wired for it. We've been storytelling for tens of thousands of years, long before we had written language. And anytime someone starts by saying, well, I just want to start by telling you a story, everybody leans in. We can't help it. We want to know what's the story. So that's how I start. Sometimes people have a lot of content, facts or scientific stuff, or I just coached a talk where a woman wanted to talk about resilience, but she's a like a naturalist. She's the head of a environmental group. She ended up talking about the understory of the forest and the mycorrhizal network and how all the trees are actually connected and they all support each other. So you learned a lot during her talk, but it was also really vulnerable and powerful. And that's kind of, I feel like that's my sweet spot when I can get there. Not every client wants to go there, but that's fine. Like, that's not every talk doesn't have to be that. But that's my goal, at least to, you know, support the content with storytelling, authentic storytelling.
Yeah, and so I'm sure that that's going to be the case as you're out there in the world talking about bittersweet. So tell me where food fits in. With I mean, I know you had your mother's recipes and stuff, but how did you choose what needed to be connected, and why is it important to you?
Well, I've been a cook my whole life, and this is the fourth book that has recipes in it. So there's a theme that kind of is part of that. Initially every chapter started with a recipe. And then that device didn't work for every single chapter, and the recipes kinda moved around, and, I finally had to sort of release the recipes themselves, although if you order the book and send me proof of purchase, I do have a cookbook with all the recipes in them, beautifully photographed, that I will send you. So, please don't forget that if you do buy it. But so every chapter is named for the food or the recipe that's part of that part of the story. And food is universal. We all have those experiences. I tell the story of a meal we were served in El Salvador during the Salvadoran War. That was just one of the most humbling experiences of my life. And it was literally rice and beans and an egg. But the context of it was really life-changing for me, and it took me a really long time to understand that experience and kind of integrate it. I hope I honor the people that were so generous with us by telling their story. So that's I guess that's the medium long answer to your question. Everyone has a favorite recipe of that their parents served at the holidays. So there's piece of that. Some of them are metaphors, and I talk about this Jello mold that my mom used to make, and how you could kind of see the fruit, but then one layer of it's opaque, and that was what it was like for me to try to find my memories and pull them out. It was like pulling them out of the gelatin. So in some cases, they are literal things that happen in my story. In some cases, they're metaphoric, but it's relatable, I think. And there's a beautiful cake on the cover for those of you who aren't watching this on video. So a cake that's sort of falling apart. So it's kind of the bitter and the sweet on the cover there.
It's really pretty, and it's got chocolate inside, I
Yes,
just
bittersweet chocolate cake with marshmallow frosting was my birthday cake as a kid. And so, yes, you can get that recipe again in the little recipe book. But yeah.
So, I wanna know, you had this life, you've had these memories, you've been in high service. What's your life like today aside from coaching people?
Well, I've kind of downshifted. My husband and I moved to a 55 plus community 4 years ago in Oceanside, California, and so it's quieter. It's kind of a beach town, and I'm very aware of mortality, living around people up into their 90s, and so I think that helps me stay in the present moment. And, I live with 6 chronic illnesses, so it's nice that there's a lot of doctors nearby, and my husband just had a huge operation on Christmas Eve that we weren't expecting. So, it's a different season of my life, but I still wanna be of service, and thankfully, having my own business coaching, I don't suffer ageism. So, I think the older, more wise and crone-like I get, probably the more people will respect me in this particular area. Not in any other area, but in this area. So, I'm leaning into that.
Well, I love that, and I love that you're talking about that because there's a lot of baby boomers on this planet in this moment, and a lot of us are what I call in the last trimester, but I love that you've taken forethought to move into a place where it can be, supportive, but at the same time, you have resources that are close to help whatever you need. And so, if anybody's out here thinking about a book, what would you say to them would be the most important thing for them to consider?
I always tell people unless it's fiction to write a book proposal. And there's a book that's been on Amazon forever called Write the Perfect Book Proposal. It'll take you through all the sections and the steps. And the reason for that is unless you're just writing for the pleasure of writing for yourself and if you want a book to be published, regardless of how that is, self-publishing, hybrid, traditional, independent, a book is a product going out into the marketplace. And so you have to know who your audience is, how you're going to reach them, what they're looking for, what they need. And that drives a lot of the decisions as a writer. So that's where I would tell people to start. Really understand what you're trying to accomplish, set your goals. What does success look like for you? Because a lot of people, they're like, oh, I want to be a New York Times bestseller. And I'm like, well, that's not a realistic goal, my friend. Like, it's a great goal, but it is, unless you've got somebody who's going to buy 10,000 copies from a bookstore that reports to the New York Times for that first week, probably not going to happen unless you're a celebrity or you get a big contract with a big five publisher because then they've paid you a lot of money, so they're going to spend money to get your book out in the world. It's, so it's just a question of like, I think for any project, defining what success looks like for you is a great place to start because you can't know if you're getting there if you haven't decided in advance, like, well, when do I stop or did I get there or, what does that feel like?
Yeah, 100%. I think for me, the passion has to drive it, not not the arrival, the destination. And so, I wanna know, how do people find you and your work in the world?
Yeah, so, it's really easy, stephanieweaver.com is my website. If you go stephanieweaver.com/bitter-sweet, that's the book page, which you can then order it from wherever you wanna order it if that's your desire. There's also a link there to my coaching website, which is experienceology.com. So if you're interested and if you're booked somewhere to speak and you're looking for a coach, I'd love to speak with you.
Okay, everybody, I hope you wrote that down, and if you missed it, rewind and get it.
Well,
Okay.
it's all in the show notes too if you're watching it listening to it on a podcast platform. So yeah.
Yeah. So I asked the same last question of every guest. The show is called Women Awakening. What do you think is the most important thing about women awakening in this moment?
We need everyone to expand, get bigger, get louder, trust your voice. Don't get smaller, don't shrink. Be loud, be obnoxious if you want to. I don't care what people think about you. Be out there. We need everybody's voices more than ever.
Well, Stephanie, I'm glad you said that because you model it. And I just want to say publicly, my gratitude for you is eternal for opening the space for me to step into a vulnerability that I wasn't even aware was totally there. So I'm grateful for you and the work that you do and that you help people, especially women, bring their voices forward.
Thank you so much, Cynthia.
All right, everybody. I want to thank you for being here at Women Awakening. I want to thank you for, subscribing and sharing with people. And if this episode inspired you, please let us know in the comments. Tell us what stood out for you. I just want you to know that you can also connect with me at cynthiajames.net. So until the next time that we get together, I'm just going to invite you to say yes. Yes to your life. Yes to rising. Yes to shining. And yes to keep awakening because you're valuable and essential and we need you on the planet right now. And she's showing us a heart. I love you and we'll see you next time.